It is my honor to introduce Ricky W. DeFoe. I have not asked him what the W stands for yet, but I intend to at some point. He currently works full-time as a language and curriculum specialist within Fond du Lac Reservation's Ojibwe Language Revitalization Program. And if you got here early, we were having a little discussion about the challenges of that. As a volunteer, he has brought the Ojibwe language and culture into the Arrowhead Juvenile Center, the Northeast Regional Corrections Center, the St. Louis County Jail, and the hospitals and hospices in our community. He's a 1976 graduate of Landreau Indian Boarding School in South Dakota, and after the recent articles in the paper, I suspect we could have him back for a whole additional program at some point about that topic. Ricky served in the U.S. Army National Guard with basic training in Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and advanced training in Fort Lee, Virginia. He's a retired Union journeyman iron worker out of Local 512. And he and I were having a discussion the other day, and those things are connected to the boarding school period, as a matter of fact. He is a pipe carrier and sweat lodge keeper, a member of the Fond du Lac Band of Minnesota Chippewa tribe. He served as chair, co-chair, and member of Duluth's Indigenous Commission for 8 years. He served on an advisory committee to ensure civilian oversight of law enforcement in Duluth, and he's helping create the current Civilian Review Board. He served as co-chair of the Annie Casey Foundation's Oversight Committee for their initiative to reduce racial disparities in juvenile detention. He traveled to Honduras with Witness for Peace to observe firsthand the devastating effects of U.S. foreign policy on Indigenous peoples and marginalized groups. As a respected elder of the Anishinaabe community, and I use that in terms of respect, not age. I'm a lot older than Ricky. Ricky has worked extensively as a cultural outreach liaison, seeking to build bridges of understanding for many programs, projects, and initiatives. So we have invited him here to help build more bridges of understanding, this time for the idea of securing rights of nature for the interdependent web of which we are all a part. I like to think of rights of nature through the lens of an ancient prophecy from indigenous Amazon peoples, the condor and the eagle, and Brett is kindly sharing this picture. This prophecy holds that for some 500 years, humankind has been split into two cultures. The condor, which is a magnificent bird of the Andes that I've never seen, represents Southern cultures, feminine energy, the heart, feeling, divine intuition, people who live in harmony with the earth. The eagle represents Northern cultures, masculine energy, the intellect, conquerors of other people, of other beings, and of the earth. But the prophecy foretells a crossroads, a coming time when the two could learn to fly together, a time when the world would once again experience a sacred rebalancing of divine masculine and divine feminine, a spiritual joining together of mutual respect and energetic embrace between the head or intellect and the heart or intuition. Many in the rights of nature movement believe that we are at that crossroads, that it is time and it must be time to work to bring about that transformation, to awaken a new level of consciousness in all of humankind, to tie the strength and power and intelligence of the eagle to the compassion and earth wisdom of the condor, to contemplate every action and its impact on 7 generations in the future. I see the rights of nature movement as a profound attempt, our best chance so far to unify the finest of Indigenous and Western cultures to create a healthy, sustainable, global community of life on Earth. Ricky has worked to reestablish Indigenous language and culture and lives an Indigenous life in the midst of the North. So he's uniquely suited to introduce us to the rights of nature concept and to share with you why he's committed to building bridges for this initiative. Thanks for being here. Miigwech for being here, Ricky.
Good job, Chico, Barb, meanwhile, Brett. Ako Anishinaabe, o Gaganuna Manito, Gina Window Ma, Jimmy Guchuini Mago Sogongo, Mino Manito, Misway Kameg, Giwita Kameg, Iwiga Gizo Ma Ewini, Atsu Kanak, Gegetash, Wayne Bojo, Minua, Ukamisan. Jueni Ma Shino Mano Gom, Bungi Etago, Ingi Kendan, O San Shinabe, Gaji Chiget Me Wenja, Kinegego O Ma Yamagat, Nashki O Kimani Tumina, Ingagwe Chima, Chiwiduko Wado Masa Nungam, Wani Ekadoyano Mano Gom. Gino Window Ma, Beba Khan Gitunji Bamin, Geget Nijinishinabek, Gegetigo Niboa Niji Bimatazi Goma, Wewini Bimatazi Yango Mano Gom. Geget Dash Miguch Gino in the Giwi Miguchi Nanig in Gil Akina Gikinu Magajik Minuat Dashing Gil Anakobi Jikanak. Mewensha Kegetigo Niganit Nishnabe Kai Niji Bimatazi. Miguchago Nungum Bimatazi o Kijigakai. Kuizens indigo o Chibwimum, be shown and do them, Nagachu nong and donchiwa. Quavo evening in Danungum, in the Jigi Kenemico, Ricky DeFoe, Animical Ke Kinoa. So I just wanted to welcome you all to this virtual circle this morning, and we always start and we, as Indigenous people, we understand and greet the those Manitou, those mysteries that surround us. And we always recognize that the other nations that were here before us, the great Dakota nation, the Cree, the Assiniboine, the Sac and Fox, and other nations that were in this area, we begin to think about creation stories. Each of our creation stories are true, are real. We have ours as Ojibwe Nation. We also have prophecies that say that we journeyed here because of the food that grows on water. Mano, the good berry. So these are some things that are, these are some, we think about them in a form of ontology. Who are we as a people? Anishinaabe. We were put here. No place in our oral history and tradition does it say that we come across a Bering Strait. Anishinaabe, the language speaks these truths. So we were put here, we were placed here. So that is our ontology, our ways of being. Epistemology talks of a way of knowing. We have forms of knowledge of how we know things. Intergenerational knowledge is a very important piece because then we have that connection to the past. We have that connection to our great grandparents, our grandparents, and our parents. They're teaching us some things. And then we in turn teach our children, our grandchildren, and our great grandchildren these things, these teachings, intergenerational. Along with those teachings comes traumas. We recognize those things. So, and we understand them. But our response to them is different depending upon the oppression that one feels. So these intergenerational knowledges are huge. We also have dream state knowledge where one fasts. We see the importance of fast in all the different cultures of the world. And it is so with indigenous peoples that the importance of fasting, the importance of staying free from food and water for a period of time to go to this liminal place. Liminal means a threshold between two worlds. So when you're fasting, you go between the physical and the spiritual. And it's very important to have elders around that are understanding of these, um, to be supportive in that fashion. So dream state knowledge, communicating and being in relationship with the unseen, because we know that things are not whole until you include the unseen. This is very important. And so the dream state, um, we understand, is a very important piece of knowledge. And we talk about today is the revitalization of culture and language. We talk about ceremonies and the language that goes with those ceremonies and the talks that go with it. We know that the ceremonies include tobacco, which is not in the form of commercial tobacco, but in the form of relationship with the trees, where you get the inner bark and things, and in the herbs and things of the plant world come together to what is called Sayama. So we kind of are connected in that fashion with that piece. I'm kind of trying to think about my frame of thought here as it travels back and forth from the trees to the tobacco. Um, so forgive me here for a moment here as I try to articulate my thoughts here about where I was going with the tobacco. But when we see the world from a lens that is in relationship, those things are more pure. So that particular lens of seeing the world is very important for us as Indigenous people to be in relationship. So let me just begin by talking about a cosmology here, and forgive me if I'm jumped away from that frame of thought. Cosmology, we went to ontology, epistemology. Now we're going to be talking about cosmology. Cosmology is the way you see the world, not only the universe, but the way you are in relationship in that world. Mankind today thinks of the cosmology as man-centric, that in the ignorance of modern man, that everything is surrounded around him or her, particularly him in this way. So that is a huge problem with the one way sees the cosmology. We know things are unseen, and also we know that we have to include those again. But then we come closer to things that we can see, the star world, Anungo Kwan. In this star world, we heard of galaxies and things and Milky Ways and all these things. We heard of the star people. These are oral traditions, oral legends that come to be passed through generations and things. So they are very important about the star world and the people there. To see a world beyond this little world bubble that we're in here called Earth, to expand one's mind is very important. And then we come closer and we see the sun, which is shining bright today here on Fond du Lac, which is a French word, but on Nagachuanong here, Wasea Magat Nongum. So then we have the night sun, the moon, which is in relationship with us. We call her our grandmother, and she takes care of many things. In a cyclical nature, Ojibwe lived through the seasons, the changing of seasons on the Akiwan. So the changing of seasons is what drives Ojibwe people in that cosmology. So you have the sun, and these things then are responsible. So we see those, and then we come to our Mother Earth. The West always thinks of the Mother Earth. This even the talk of calling her Earth, instead of owning it, that we refer to her as our mother, life-giving force, seems to be a problem in the Western world. And on our Mother Earth are orders of things that were placed here that we come to know. The Rock Nation, we call a nation because in our language, the Rock Nation are alive, animate. In the English language, are inanimate rocks. You heard of the term a box of rocks. So these things are a different worldview, and it's important for us to know that the Rock Nations here first, the mountains, and to bring that stability to Anishinaabe. And then you have the seedlings, the grasses, the plants, the bushes, the trees. They came next that were placed here, and they give us the oxygen for life. And then next that was placed here in the order of things was the animal nation, the flyers, the walkers, the swimmers, the crawlers, and all the other ones that occupy this space. Those, it's very important to include those when we think about this worldview. So you got that inclusion. I'm kind of losing my train of thought here because I'm looking out this window here and I'm seeing these things here. But it's a different setting for it, so forgive me, please. So you've got they give the oxygen, and then the animals in all their forms bring the brotherhood to Anishinaabe. And then last, Anishinaabe was lowered here, was put here. So this is our worldview as Ojibwe peoples. So in that worldview, we were here last, so they can, of course, live without us, but we can't live without them. So again, when you think about those things, then you juxtapose that with the Western worldview, where rocks are inanimate and man is at the top. You have a hierarchy of life. There is a root paradigm that they say that is detrimental to our well-being, and it's unsustainable. And there's three elements to it. The first one being a dominion over all things, where we say that our approach to nature is to beat it into submission, dominion over all things. And then we have that hierarchy of life. In America, we know that the white man is at the top and the black man is at the bottom. The women are underneath even the man. So these are some problems. We see the great chain of being and how that was as a social force that influenced many people's thinkings through the generations, became a problem. So we think about that way of, I'm gonna have to do something here with this. It's a way of thinking, the great chain of being, that hierarchy of life. And then also, which is, controversial, but nevertheless, it's part of that root paradigm, that there is a male transcendent God. And we have that conversation and dialogue much, is the great mystery of a man or a woman. And we don't know. Our language doesn't discern that for us, but we know there's mystery there. So I think that worldview is very important. So then the Western world is upside down. So as a collective, we have to then, our challenge is to right side that upside down world that we see. And that's not an easy thing to do when there's lots of social forces at play that compel us to think of of our world that's despiritualized. And so we have to be in relationship with one another in that regards. There's lots of problems with the way we conduct ourselves in our thoughts, because when we believe things, we don't think actively about those. We just believe them, and that's a huge problem. We have to be critical thinkers about those things, because culture and nature are actual worlds. This nowadays, the anthropogenic world of economic exchanges and all the entertainments of various kinds and things is an illusion. And the challenge is, how do we see the world? Through which lens? Do you recognize the impacts of colonization? And is it continuing today? As Indigenous peoples, we say we fight colonialism, capitalism, racism, and patriarchy. There's lots of folks that have been harmed because of those truths. When you repeat and echo truths that have generational knowledge, there's danger in this world. We live in a world that we've been born into, a world that's very violent. Armed, misogynist society that's racist. So we live in this world, and we have to understand that part of it to see what we see. For instance, as Anishinaabe, we have a double consciousness. Do I see myself through your lens? Because too often we do that, and we identify ourselves through others' eyes. This is very harmful psychologically and emotionally, and it brings much despair to Indigenous people. So we have to understand how we see ourselves. That's why we have ceremony to center ourselves in this world, so that we have to understand our culture and also the culture of dominant mainstream America. But we talk about rights of nature. It's not a too far jump for anybody in America if you're actively thinking. We see everybody's accepted, not everybody, but it's been common normative now to that a corporation is a person. And so then to see rights of nature as rivers and trees and these species and things that in the midst of all the challenges that we face have rights. And if we continue to think of Mother Earth as a resource rather than a source of life, I think that is part of the problem. And so how do you see the world? And which lens are you looking through? Are you critically doing that? And I know you and I here see the reciprocity that is needed for a true humanity, not just any kind of pretentious manifestations of humanitarianism, but actual work, cross-cultural work that will enable communities to push beyond and change the collective consciousness that exists in people, to be in relationship with life-giving forces. That's the beauty. There's beauty in there. There's natural highs in that. Anishinaabe live by natural law. When we live by natural law, then we understand that we are healthier, and spiritual law. And when we live by spiritual law day in, day out, we're happier. And it's only when the man-made laws come that oppression is felt and hardships are extended. And part of that is not recognizing all of these living beings as having rights. In the English court systems, property rights are paramount. They are holding the most high regard. People are able to defend their property with violence and get away with that. So there's a problem, and I think that's us as environmentalists and activists and workers in relationship with the natural world have that challenge. And this is the education piece where we educate the ignorant, willfully or not, about as we head towards a precipice, a cliff, a point, a tipping point. The signs are all around. We need rights of nature. And then we have to ask ourselves, sometimes the rights of nature bring even the concept thinks, I can't see the water as alive. I can't see the estuary as a living being because of all those social forces that the great chain of being, the media and things that push us to think of this world as the only world that we know. So we can't think beyond the box. And I think that there's a movement and we have to be on the right side of that movement. And I think you and I are. So whenever we begin this a great work, it is said that we do our part, we do our role, we fulfill our role, our duties, our responsibilities. As Indigenous peoples, we have that reciprocity, and it's so as stewards of the land to take care of we don't own this land, but we know that when we take care of the land takes care of us. It's back and forth. These are living ecosystems. We have the atmosphere, we have the ecosphere, we have the biosphere. These are worlds, these are communities. The estuary is the largest freshwater estuary in the United States, and it's one of the most contaminated. They'll make you think that this place is being cleaned up, but there's like putting band-aids on something that needs surgery. They pour little bits and pieces of money, $1 billion, which isn't a lot of money in today's terms, divided by 30 organizations to clean up and try to rid the designation that the estuary, the St. Louis River estuary, is one of the most polluted areas on the Great Lakes. So they're trying to eliminate that from your consciousness so that you can't see that anymore. So it's out of sight, out of mind. And so our push is to join the movement and continue to do the work. And then we realize that it might not be done in our lifetime, but our children are watching what we're doing, and the grandchildren and the great grandchildren, and they'll pick up that work. Little by little, we could do some great things. And this is part of that work that we're doing for Wankum. Wankum is a group of us that are dialoguing about these concepts and identifying the challenges that we meet every day and trying to change the collective consciousness of the masses to create a critical mass that will compel these governing municipalities to do what's right and establish rights of nature, particularly for, I think one of the biggest challenges for the St. Louis River estuary is these lines of demarcation, which are oppressive lines, not natural lines, but that say the state of Minnesota, the state of Wisconsin, the international border. But this is a microcosm of what we're talking about when we're talking about natural law, spiritual law, in man-made law, because man-made law is what's the challenges. But in the court system, the English court, um, it's almost like we're trying to use the system that creates the problems. We're trying to use that as a tool to rectify the problems that they created. Even that concept is hard to fathom. So we think about the international court and its legitimacy in the rogue nations, such as the United States, in that court system, have no respect for that, and they're not held into account. But we know that Mother Nature will hold all to account in the course of time. In the world we live in, it's just like in the past 200 years, the is destroyed parts of the planet that took millions of years to form. This is how at the speed that things are happening now. So we have to have a mix of urgency and patience in our drive for rights of nature. And that's what we're tasked with. So in any community, we help one another. So we look for ways how we can help, being in relationship cross culturally, establishing everything. I think is relational, and the importance of that, because mainstream America will tell you that you're individual, and you keep your focus on the material and not the spiritual. So we live in a despiritualized community that's become norm, and that's the challenge. So being in relationship with one another, I think, is huge, not only for our own well-being individually, but for our families and the communities that live close by to each other. Not to believe, to recognize the community that we live in called America is really a sick society. We've got to be truthful about that. We live in a very sick society, and once we recognize that, and then we can start to do things cross-culturally, and where we look at one another as equals, true equals in humanity, not any things pretentious, but to honor differences in things in the way we relate to one another. So we can frame the rights of nature in different ways, but the bottom line is that we have to do something. Even they say that we're grieving people, you have to do something with your grief. When we're grieving for the polluted waterways and all the things that go on, and that we see the frogs being with 4 or 6 legs, 2 heads, all these mutations taking place because of the contaminants in the waterways there. These things are shocking, but we must come together, I think, and work together. Together is where we'll find, dialogue is where we'll find the answers to those questions being posed. How do we, but we can build on the successes of countries like, Ecuador, and I think it's Brazil, and New Zealand, and India, that have already established rights of nature in their constitutions. The great white earth nation has put Monoman wild rice as having rights. And so we have to have a hook, so to speak, how we're going to establish rights in nature for the so-called St. Louis River estuary. Will it be the wild rice, which has not been there since 1900, I think? There's stories that it was plentiful there. that Fond du Lac was the community of Fond du Lac at the far end of the lake was actually the center of our universe, plentiful and wild rights, all the animals, everything was there. The buffalo was but a short couple-day journey to the south and west. So this, we have to return to those, the center of the universe, way we see in the world. So I think it's in dialogue is where we'll find those answers, and I think that's why I'm so honored and to be here and, and to share in some of those the cosmology, the ontology, the epistemology, the philosophy, the values, the actions create the institutions. And these institutions that are supposed to protect our rights of way, the waters, the rights of nature, and the water, the life-giving things, are failing us. The lawyers, the political action committees, the think tanks are all working in concert with one another to bring destruction. So are we for life or are we for death? We want to live a full life and we want to live it now. And then our religions, our ways of life will talk about after. But for now, we want to do the very best that we can. And I'm not sure if we got a time, check on the time, but I don't want to, I know it's important that we dialogue and question and answers and things. So kind of think about some questions, kind of think about some comments.